Recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just, I would think that Ben Rhodes would be falling all over himself to come here. I mean, he seems to think he's so much smarter than everybody. Well, educate everybody. Tell us why those of us who oppose this were wrong. Show us what we're missing. Educate the American people. I think it would have been a great opportunity for him if, in fact, he is as smart and worldly as he says. And I think part of this, yes, there's deception involved, and anytime a major policy is sold to the Congress or the public, that is a major, major thing. Rhodes himself said that the Iran deal was going to be the Obamacare of the second term. And, of course, with Obamacare in the first term, the president famously said over and over again, if you like your plan, you can keep it. If you like your plan, you can keep it. Not only was that not true, the administration knew at the time it would not be true, and yet they did it in order to engineer passage of Obamacare. And then with this deal, the president was in the presidential debate in 2012. He said the deal is very simple that I'll accept. They end their nuclear program. It's pretty straightforward, he says. And, of course, what we see now is Iran retains really a major, major nuclear program. I believe they're on a path to a bomb at worst once the 8 to 15 years goes up. So there's a lot, I think, that's important about that, and it's important to talk about it. But I also think that some of what we're talking about with Rhodes, for example, the idea that, well, Rouhani's election really changes everything because this guy's a moderate. Never mind that he would never have been allowed to run by the Ayatollah if he truly wanted to change the nature of the regime. So you have a regime that's the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. You have a regime which people fail to mention that they were responsible for as many as 1,500 American deaths in Iraq. They were leading the Quds Force, Soleimani. They were funding these massive EFP bombs, which took out at least hundreds of our soldiers and probably as many as 1,500. So that's the nature of the regime. And the notion that was propagated, and Rhodes is honest about it, says, look, this is an opening, it's a new, we got to take this opportunity. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Well, it turns out they never believed that. They knew that this is a regime. In fact, they were negotiating with the regime before Rouhani had ever been elected. And so all that was kind of a ruse to camouflage the basic policy, and I think Mr. Doran hit on it. This is a policy that understands the radical nature of the Iranian regime, understands the hostile nature of the Iranian regime, and is doing a deal with those hardliners to effectively solidify those hardliners, and they think that that's the way to have a more peaceful world. And so the deception's important just for itself, but what it really masks is when I'm going through all this, this is the biggest thing we've done this Congress. I thought that John Kerry and the President, these people were very naive about how they conceived of the Iranian regime. Turns out they really weren't that naive. They knew exactly what we knew, and they still wanted to go ahead with it. And so that's why I think it's very, very troubling. And then we're seeing that now play out with really gratuitous concessions, such as giving Iran indirect access to the American dollar. That wasn't even called for by the Iran deal, and yet that is something that the administration is doing. And so I think that this is important. There are few, I don't think we've done an issue this important in the Congress in years and years. And so the idea that you're not up front with the American people is very important. But I think what this should allow us to do, I'd like to tease out the implications now of this policy with somebody like Mr. Rhodes. So, Mr. Doran, what's your view? I mean, it seems like the Rouhani as a moderate, they admit it's a ruse, so they knew very well the nature of the regime, and they think that effectively us unilaterally stepping back from having a confrontational posture with Iran is going to be better for the world's security?
I think that's right. I think the President has a vision of the Middle East as a kind of round table now. The security architecture is a kind of round table, and we have all the stakeholders around the round table, and the Iranians are stakeholders. And the assumption is that if we start treating them with respect and respecting their interests, that they'll come toward us, and that the key assumption, I think the key false assumption here is that they share the same interests that we do, the same core interests, defeating ISIS, stabilizing Iraq, and so on. I think particularly relevant are the views of Fred Hoff at the Atlantic Council, who was President Obama's point man on Syria from 2009 to 2012. He's somebody who understands the, there's nobody who's been Obama administration's policies on Syria than Fred Hoff, and he has now come around to the view that President Obama has, in effect, recognized Syria as an Iranian sphere of interest, and did so in order to reach the agreement with them.
Well, I appreciate it. I think the upshot of all this, the nuclear obviously very significant, but even beyond that, Iran is really emerging as the dominant power in the region. How you can see that's good for our security